The Christmas tree light experiment. So, this is a string of genuine vintage 20 bulb Christmas tree lights. So, when you do the maths, British mains, let's just call it 240 because it simplifies it. Normal running, they should average about 12 volts across each bulb. And this string, it's not been constantly running, but it's been mostly running non-stop since 2022. Yes. So yeah, the significance of the runtime, because you kind of think, well, once they're on, and they're off, they're off. It's more along the failure mechanism of a tungsten bulb, that as they heat up and cool down, every time you do that, there's multiple mechanisms at play. One is an inrush current, because they're not all exactly identical, the filaments. There's always going to be one filament that takes the brunt of the voltage across it. The current through them is all going to be the same because they're in series. But if one filament it starts to warm up slightly quicker than the others, all of a sudden the resistance of it will rise and the mains voltage across it will rise up quicker, and it can actually see a far higher peak voltage than its actual average working voltage. So for that instantaneous moment, it dissipates a huge amount of power compared to what it should be, so you get bright turn-on flashes of a couple of bulbs. So that's one mechanism. The other is every time they heat up and cool down, there's micro fractures happen in the tungsten filament. So the general point is that if they are left on, if filament bulbs are just left on, the operational hours they get is far greater than cyclic on-off. So had these been turned on and off every day, they'd have probably lasted maybe a month or so, maybe a couple, hard to say. Had these been just left on constantly, they'd be lasting longer they'd still be doing better than they are now. But I obviously have moved house and moved stuff around and been doing work, so multiple times they've had to be on off. But tonight, so again, another thing with these series bulbs is you'll notice some aren't glowing. They have a special little jumper in them, so you have the filament, but round the bottom of the two wires that come up in the bulb, there's an oxide coated piece of wire, and what happens is when the bulb blows, because the others are in circuit, the full mains voltage, a peak of about 340 volts, ends up across that blown bulb. It's the open circuit. It's essentially a switch at that point. It's what you'd see across the switch. You either see zero voltage when it's on or full voltage when it's open. So what happens is that oxide coating, which normally doesn't have enough voltage across it because the filament limits the voltage, suddenly has full mains voltage across it. The oxide ruptures through, and then it forms a conduction path where it will weld in micro patches and start conducting. Now, some of these bulbs have actually done that, and then like several days later, all of a sudden I've noticed they're working again. That must be where the connection to the incoming supply wires has come loose again or something, and the filament itself is just in a position where it was actually the two opposing charges of the mains at the ends of those filaments at that tiny fractured break have been enough to draw it together, and it's then fused back together. So like for instance, there's a bulb, that one there next to my finger, which is definitely lit, is one that was actually out and has started working again. Now it can't just be because it was a dodgy connection, because if the connection had been bad, all the lights would have been out because they're in series. So anyway, yes, all of them were lit for, like I said, several years, and then eventually a couple of weeks back, like one blew, then two blew, the FreeBlue. And anyway, over the last few days it's sped up, and today came home and there was another one out, and then a couple more have gone since then. And bearing in mind these are 12 volt bulbs, there's now 2, 4, 6, 7 of them out. They're running at full 240 volt main straight across them, so they must have somewhere between 18 or 19 volts across each bulb. And not only are they running it like double power, what they should be now, they are also tired. Remember, they've got thousands of hours on them, so they're a good bulb would have a very limited lifespan it running it, you know, that elevated voltage. Bear in mind with electricity, if you increase by the square root of 2, so you know, if you have 12 volts and you increase to 18, you'll double the power, because current also goes up with voltage. So you, as power is voltage times current, you increase voltage by essentially nearly 50%. It's not quite, but just for the sake of the maths to make it easier, you increase voltage by 50%, and current goes up by 50%, and therefore power doubles. It's like I say, it's actually the square root of 2. It's 6 dB increase. You know, you double voltage, you quadruple power. However, because tungsten filaments aren't a static resistance, they're a linear temperature dependent resistance. An increase of voltage across a tungsten filament also means the increase in power dissipation causes the filament to burn hotter, so its resistance does go up, so current doesn't go up in the exact proportion to voltage as it normally would, so therefore power doesn't go up as rapidly as it would. It still increases, but not as much as it would do on a fixed resistance. So yes, I'm just filming these because at any moment now they all have to just die. Every time one of these goes out, the others then have to share that additional voltage between them, and at the same point, because the series resistance across the incoming supply is now lessened because another one is now just been shunted out with that oxide connection, current increases a little bit more as well. So voltage increases, current increases, power increases, and at some point it has to reach a tipping point where they just cannot survive any length of time at those elevated power levels, and then it'll just, all of them will pop. And I thought I'd reached that point because I was just happened to be filming as a couple more went as I was filming, but they seem to have equalized now. These bulbs are clearly very good quality bulbs which are taking a lot of abuse, but I thought I'd just film this out of interest, something random for the channel, something just for me to look back on, or anyone else who's just got some weird, likes doing weird things. But what I'm planning on doing, I'm thinking I might actually set up a I'm doing some works in here at the minute. I've over the coming months, I've done a lot over the coming months. A lot more is going to get done, but at some point I'm going to have my workbench fully up and running again, and I might just set up an experiment of a set of light bulbs just on, and live stream it on something. Just, yeah, put a set of random, just for people who just like weird random experiments like that, because people will watch it. Just a set of light bulbs glowing, see how long they last before they just eventually all blow. These are definitely going to have to go tonight. There's no way they can last much longer like this. They're just glowing so bright. They remind me of what Christmas tree lights looked like when I was a kid, like these amazingly intense colours and bright lights. You know, just looking at them with wonder and joy, thinking, oh, they look incredible. They actually do look quite bright. The colours are a bit faded because they've been subjected to the heat and light output of the filaments for several years, but they've still done pretty well. The pinks are the ones that have really sacrificed the most. That's a red you can see it looks now. Sorry, let's line it up. That's a red. It looks quite red. That's a looks very white in person. That pink, and that should be a yellow. That's a yellow. You can see the blue there, but the yellows are an orange. I think it's actually an orange. It should be. But yeah, the pink ones are just looking white almost. It's completely burned through, and then the extra intensity burning out them. But yes, the experiment is nearly coming to an end. How long will a set of Christmas tree lights last if they'd just been constantly left on and plugged in? Yes, and not much longer is the answer. Since I turned these on. I think it was Christmas 2021. I actually dug them out. There was a brand new chain back then, and I turned them on. And yeah, they had been on off a few times before else, and I just thought in 2022, do you know what? I'm just going to turn them on and leave them on, and I did. And here they are, not going to be on for much longer.